I'd start normally by talking about how the garden actually came about. There are actually two answers to that question.
Yeah.
How it came about was the impact of the experience of working in Haifa, that it needed some form of expression, some concrete expression of that impact.
This particular one is a late king flower. It's the king protea. It's the largest flower in the family. The king bushes flower in autumn and spring. Eventually, as it matures, it will open out flat like a dinner plate size.
And welcome to Baha'i On Air. Today I'm interviewing two very special people who've created a sculptural habitat in Matakana. Tony and Wendy, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Where did the idea for this sculptural habitat come from?
Well, we were both in Haifa. We were invited to serve there. I was initially with the Office of Holy Places, and Tony was initially with the Gardens Office, and then transferred to Mount Carmel Projects. And then I moved on to Mount Carmel Projects for the last 6 years. So we were there for about a total of 12 years.
Can you just tell the audience what? I mean, many people will have seen the photographs of the Baha'i World Centre, but even still, I'd love you to just describe, maybe Tony, what the Mount Carmel Projects are. Because you were there at a very specific time.
Yes, we were. It was a great privilege to happen to be there at the time that the Terraces project was under construction.
We've been serving here for 11 years. We came from London to here. We were invited to come from London, and at that time Wendy and I were on a working holiday from New Zealand, and we'd been in London for 2 or 3 years, and the opportunity to come and serve here came up, and so we accepted it. And Wendy initially worked with the building section in the Department of Holy Places, and I joined the Gardens. And in 1994 I started with the Carmel Projects work on the building of these terrace gardens.
Is this where we start?
This is where we start.
Yeah.
So what you're looking at now is nothing like what it was when we came, even the wetland. But the wetland was actually one of the main reasons why we were attracted to this property, because quite clearly this whole area had a particular feeling, and it was quite distinct, but it was completely choked by noxious weeds and so forth and so on. Fortunately, the first year we were here, the wetland itself dried out completely.
Oh wow, so you were able to get in?
So we were able to get in, clean out all the rubbish, and then subsequently it filled again. And the lilies were taken from ponds that were by the house. So, but the carex grasses are just fantastic. And they
all self-seeding?
All self-seeding.
Oh my.
And they say that some of them have probably been here for 80 odd years.
Oh wow. Fantastic.
And these ones here actually grow on trunks. So, you know, like the black boy in Australia, the tree. So this has a trunk.
Did you plant those?
No, we didn't plant any of these.
This all self-seeded?
Yeah.
And, you know, even the flax?
The flax, yeah.
Oh, wow.
And the azolla weed, we actually rake off and use as compost because it's quite rich in nitrogen.
Oh, it must be rich in nitrogen, yeah.
fixes nitrogen from the atmosphere, and it's very good for composting, and so we gather it up and we put it around plants so that it gives them some nitrogen nutrient.
So the garden itself is created in layers, from micro works to macro works, and the micro works are the writings of Baha'u'llah, who is the founder of the Baha'i Faith, and they're all enclosed.
The development of the terraces was in addition to existing gardens that had been developed here around the holy places. This was a 10-year project, and that's not all it was. It was a process. It was a process that started over 100 years ago. It started with Baha'u'llah, who the Baha'is understand to be a manifestation of God, and he, in the latter years of his life, when he visited Mount Carmel, he pointed out the very spot up here where the remains of the prophet herald of the faith, the Bab, who announced the coming of Baha'u'llah as a new manifestation of God. He pointed out the exact spot to his son, Abdul-Baha, as to where the remains of the Bab should be buried. It was some 50 years later that Abdul-Baha erected the first part of the shrine of the Bab and was able to bring the remains of the Bab, who was martyred in Iran in 1850, to the spot to bury him. And even though historically this mountain, Mount Carmel, has been known as the Mountain of the Lord, at that point that Baha'u'llah decided that this was the place that the Bab should be buried, this place became a very sacred spot. So the design of the terraces, the terrace gardens, actually originated from a vision of Baha'u'llah. And it was carried by his son Abdul-Baha, who actually did the planning work involved in envisaging 9 terraces leading up to the shrine and 9 above the shrine as an adornment to the shrine. It's like the shrine is the jewel in this ring.
It was in 3 parts, the gardens, in terms of a formal internal area, which was a lot of stonework, pools, running water down the terraces. There's ornamentation, and this is where ornamentation, the way in finials and urns.
The ornamentation on the terraces was actually largely done by us. There's something like about 400 pieces in stone and bronze, and we did most of the work here. A piece of ornamentation from the gardens from probably 30 years ago, and it was purchased as part of Shoghi Effendi, who was the guardian of the faith, his efforts in designing and combining ornamentation with the gardens when he was constructing them.
So the main features of water and stonework and ornamentation and lighting, because the lighting, especially at night, the whole of the terraces are lit, is because, you know, as a tribute to the imprisonment time of the Bab when he was in the dark. The rest of the project was extensions to the terraces of the Shrine of the Bab, the building of an underground building under that, the strengthening of the wall that held that whole terrace, middle terrace of the Shrine of the Bab in place. That was one of the early jobs. The building of 2 buildings, of administration buildings, on either side of the seat of the Universal House of Justice.
And they were big buildings.
They were big buildings. And
how many levels did they go into the ground?
So some of them had 2 or 3 levels of car parks underground, and they were. One was 9 levels, and the other one I think was 7 levels. Yeah. And most of it was underground, and the 2 stories above ground were to fit in with the existing buildings and not to be intrusive in the landscape. So the project was really extensive, and the buildings would be better to be supervised on site. Then the House of Justice asked us to take over all of the gardens in Haifa. The end result of this change, this sudden change to the project, was that I was asked to take responsibility for building a maintenance organisation for the gardens, because the terraces were being completed in stages. So the lower terraces, groups of 3 terraces were being completed bit by bit. And as they were being completed or got to the stage where landscaping was taking place and the mountain was being put back together again, we needed to take over that and start maintaining it and start training people and start doing all of the carry on, all the things that you need to present the world, class of standard that we've got now.
How many people at that time do you think were employed on the job?
I'd actually physically employed 400 people myself and sacked 300.
I like that, yes. Yeah.
So anyway, it was...
Because very specific work, very specific.
Yes.
Probably the most demanding thing for me in the work is to deal with a staff that covers 6 different religions and probably about 20 or 30 different countries. Israel is a challenging place to live in, with or without conflict. Climatically, it's quite harsh. We have many consequences in the gardens of the environmental influence. It has high humidity. It's a very young country, and it's had lots of conflicts up to this point. And you can see the consequences in this country where they haven't been able to develop in the manner that they might like to. It's still going on now. While Haifa seems to be somewhat isolated from it and a little bit protected, generally Israel is a very safe place to live in. It has nothing like the level of crime that you experience in some Western countries. It has the crimes against the person are very, very rare. It's a very safe place for people to walk around at night, whether they be male or female, by themselves or in groups. While there's always tension here, and it does have its challenges living here, the current conflict is not disturbing us, and it's not interrupting our work.
So the two of you worked for this specific project for 7 years, the terraces, but Wendy, you were also working on other sites around Israel, weren't you? You weren't just specifically working on the terraces as such. You were working in other holy places that the Baha'i World Centre has.
Well, initially I wasn't actually on the terraces. I was in the Office of Holy Places.
Yeah, so that's all the other places.
So that's all the other places.
Yeah.
And primarily organising the work for the restoration and maintenance of the holy places.
So were you two working pretty much in the same office?
No. Wendy was in a different office. But
thank goodness.
It was a
No pillow talk.
It was a result of this that there were 2, actually it's interesting, there were 2 New Zealand boys that were currently working in the ornaments section, and one of them, Murray Dunn, ended up our son-in-law, and the other one, Oliver Stratton-Powell. Together, with a little bit of voluntary help, in an 18-month period, they made 365 reconstituted stone ornaments.
It was marathon.
Stone, that is amazing.
And plus bronze ornaments. They had to start from carving blocks of plaster to the shape of the urns that were required and the finials that were required, etc., etc. It was a mammoth effort.
You're talking about huge work, terraces, buildings, everything. How long was the project, the terraces project?
The terraces project was 11 years from start to finish.
Yeah.
And
were you on that the entire 11 years?
No, the first few years were in the planning stages, and I joined in 1993, I think, or 94, I think.
You were there 9 years.
We were there for
both of you.
We were there for 12 years in total.
12,
but 9 years of that was on the project.
So this is the first layer, or an example of the first layer, which are the micro works we were talking about. And this is a... Yep, open it. quotation from Baha'u'llah, who, as you know, is the prophet founder of the Baha'i Faith.
Look into all things with a searching eye, Baha'u'llah.
So the idea is that this provides the spiritual and philosophical underpinnings of this whole endeavour. So this is like the inner voice of the property. And then people sort of slow down and they start to observe things in a different way and look at things through different eyes.
On their travel as they go through.
But the interesting thing about this quote is that these two pieces of metal I actually brought back from Haifa. So it's quite special in its own way, this particular one.
Yes. And is that, are we going to find all the quotes like that, or is each one of these going to be different?
Each is individual, and the exterior of it will symbolise what is on the interior.
Oh, wow.
And the construction is deliberately very simple. One of the important things was that all of the ideas that are used in this property are accessible to people.
Yeah.
So they can actually take them away and use them in their own way if they so wish.
Let's move on.
While the gardens are principally designed on the basis of an appropriate environment with the right ambience for reverence and devotion and prayerful meditation for pilgrimage, which includes the Baha'is, of course, at this point in time, they are also open to the public. The gardens are not confined to the Baha'is, but the design itself has the spiritual concept in mind. There's a point here which has to be remembered with these gardens, and that is there's beautiful gardens everywhere. And people may think that this garden here, while it is unique, is in somehow comparable with other gardens in the world. And to some degree it is, but this is not a botanical garden. It's not a park. It's a specific spiritual design that creates an atmosphere for people to approach this most holy shrine.
There you both are working in a formal garden which eventually becomes a UNESCO site. What an honour. You know, there aren't many places in the world that become a UNESCO site. So there you are, both of you working in these highly formalised gardens. Now, Wendy, where does that idea come from?
Well, the germ of the idea was definitely generated in Haifa.
Yeah.
In as much as it occurred to me, and I mentioned it to a friend, I might have also mentioned it to Tony, that it would be great when we left Haifa if we were able to develop a garden. And so this had stuck in my mind for numerous reasons. One was that my own background was arts and design, and so if ever we left, it occurred to me I'd like to go back into the arts in a completely new area, preferably sculpting, but not in the conventional sense. So those kind of ideas were seeded while I was actually in Haifa. When we had left and we had sold a property in Auckland and were driving looking for other properties, I happened to say to Tone, wouldn't it be great if we could actually consider doing a garden? And Tone said, well, why don't we? We now are in a position where that might be a possibility, so let's look for a property with that in mind. And so it was kind of interesting because suddenly this germ was taking on a whole life of its own, and in fact it became the driving force for actually looking at properties from that point on. And also up in the top of these is beautiful as well.
And so, was all of this here before?
This was all here, but it was all quite stagnant. So, and 2/3 of the willows were dead, so we took those out and retained these because the structure itself is beautiful. And it adds a particular feeling to this particular area of the wetland. So it's got almost, you know, an ancient feeling. And those areas of character that different parts of the property had, we've tried to preserve so that everywhere you go has a completely different feeling. Yeah.
So now we have attained the station of maturity. And this is the second quote of Baha'u'llah's that we've come across in the garden.
So this one's talking about that lovely parallel between the inner environment and the outer environment. So sow the seeds of my divine wisdom in the pure soil of the heart.
And again, that allusion to a garden.
Absolutely.
And the environment
Yeah,
and soil of the heart, which is actually, it's lovely, isn't it? And I love the way that you've made a heart on the outside and used it as the handle to open it.
So I like the way they just sort of age as well.
Oh, yeah. And you see now the spider's put its cobweb
Yeah,
there.
fantastic. And at different times of the year there'll be shelves of fungi growing down here.
Same materials, that same brushwood fence at the back. Same materials, tell me about it.
This is called A Prayer for Peace. And this one is called Song of Praise. This is the twin to the other one.
Yeah.
So it's in praise of the wetland, a piece about thanksgiving for not just the wetland, but actually the overall environment, but specifically the wetland.
And what's it made of? Wendy?
Well, all of the pieces are primarily made of material of the property, except for some of the metal pieces.
Yeah.
And so all of these things were used, and so it's part of that whole sort of sustainable living philosophy. And the panels are, a piece like this will last about 3 years. And the idea is that unlike sculptural pieces that you put in a garden and they're objects which endure, these are designed to break down and be part of the organic process itself.
Which is what the whole garden's doing too.
Which is what the whole garden's doing. And as the fundamental concept is spiritual transformation, which involves a process of renewal and decay and so forth, then these come into that concept quite well. So all of these things we use on the property. The bamboos we use to stake plants, the cable ties we use for, obvious reasons. The brushed fencing is quite specific because it allows, as you can see, the light to come through.
So at certain times of the day with the sun coming through that would be...
Yeah, and these panels will light up. They're two-way colours. So for example, this will go from bright pink through to orange as the light hits it. So they change quite dramatically with the light and shade. And the idea also is that they appear to be growing out of the ground. So all of the pieces appear to be born of the habitat itself rather than imposed on it.
Yeah.
And that piece will last about 3 years and then I'll change it.
Yeah.
So this has just been renewed recently.
Prayer for peace. Again, having seen the heart, this looks like, I don't know, grass?
Yep, blades
of
of grass.
Oh, look at that. Within every blade of grass are enshrined the mysteries of an inscrutable wisdom. Baha'u'llah.
So that's just to remind us of the depth and breadth of the spiritual dimension, which we barely know.
We just don't see, do we?
No.
Well, I'm sure some people do, but all the vibrations within a blade of grass. Gosh, if you could see that, would you ever move? You'd be so busy looking at everything.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, it's amazing when you think of the desolation when that tree fell down, and now it's virtually become a little forest.
Yeah, its own little ecosystem happening.
And you've put little, sculptures on some of the roots.
The spirals actually represent the inner voice of the piece, and it's a very light musical melodia, and they trip right across the piece. You'll see them and disappear over the wall at the other end. But one of the things that people love about this one is, apart from the size, is the whole texture. And now, of course, it's undressing with the bark coming off.
Yeah.
It's just exquisite, but the whole form is beautiful.
It's almost like a huge elephant, isn't it, that's fallen. It's something gigantic that's leant over.
And of course, if you wanted to build a sculpture this size, it would cost an absolute fortune. And this is unique.
Yeah.
It would, you know, it will never be repeated.
No.
These
And again, you've got the works going through here.
Yeah, and right over the top.
Yeah.
And as they catch the cobwebs, you know, it's just beautiful.
Oh, well, the cobwebs are like almost becoming part of it, aren't they?
Yeah.
And you obviously have a quote here. You're going to...
There's quotes down at the end.
Yeah.
And so these are...
Lovely.
The seed has sacrificed itself to the tree. Had it not done so, the tree would not have come into existence. So we forget that sacrifice is an integral part of the whole process.
Of growth.
Of growth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There has to be sacrifice in order to be growth. Yeah. Yeah.
And the wall was built, or 2/3 of the wall was built from the limbs of this tree. So it's literally one piece.
Wow. And again, that wall is made up of different sizes, all making something that is unified.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's kind of taken that horizontal plane of that piece and put it on the...
Yeah, vertical. It's a big wall, Wendy.
It's a big wall. It's a big, beautiful wall.
Yeah.
Look at that spider web in there.
Oh no, it's just fantastic.